Hello. Today General Hospital will reveal as the pale glow of the computer screen cast shifting shadows across Maxie's tense face. She felt the weight of something sinister slowly closing in around her. What had begun as a simple internal audit, prompted by Brooke Lynn's casual yet oddly urgent remarks about Natalya's warnings concerning Sonny's questionable investment in Deception Cosmetics, had spiraled into something far darker than she ever could have anticipated. At first, Maxie expected to find minor inconsistencies, perhaps a few misfiled invoices, irregular expenditures typical of a company undergoing restructuring. But what unfolded before her was not mere oversight or error, it was manipulation on a scale so deliberate and meticulous that it took her breath away. The numbers simply didn't match. The balance sheet seemed altered, with cash flow projections diverging inexplicably from transactional records. Ghost payments had been made to entities that didn't exist on any supplier registry, and there were shipping invoices for product lines that had never even gone into production. She noticed that some data fields had been overwritten in the dead of night, well outside business hours, suggesting remote access. And that's when Maxie's pulse quickened. Deception's accounting software had built-in security parameters, yet someone had bypassed them without triggering alerts. This wasn't a mistake. This was sabotage. Maxie's instincts, honed from years of navigating the treacherous waters of fashion PR, business deals, and boardroom politics, told her something bigger was at play. And then, like a poisoned whisper resurfacing in her mind, Natalya's cryptic warning returned: Sonny was hiding something. There was a flash drive with damning information, Natalya had said, one she had locked away to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. At the time, Maxie had taken it as cautious prudence, even as Brooke Lynn remained skeptical. But now, with every file she uncovered, every untraceable transaction and false invoice, it became increasingly clear that Natalya had planted that narrative intentionally, to deflect scrutiny and direct it toward Sonny. Instead of Sonny being the culprit, what if he had been the target? Driven by this chilling new perspective, Maxie dove deeper into the system logs, determined to follow every trail of digital breadcrumbs. What she found was undeniable. A series of remote logins had occurred over several weeks, all masked behind anonymous IP addresses and using a VPN service with a unique digital signature, one that Maxie recognized from earlier deception correspondence. She remembered Natalya once proudly explaining her secure network habits during a business retreat in Berlin. That exact VPN signature had now reappeared in every unauthorized access timestamp. The rabbit hole only went deeper from there. Maxie's suspicion turned to resolve. She contacted Spinelli, her trusted ally in all things digital, and explained the situation without embellishment. Within hours, he confirmed her worst fears. The accounting software had been tampered with. Someone had embedded a concealed plugin, coded to run silently in the background, that allowed remote manipulation of financial entries. The plugin had been installed months ago, precisely during the time frame when Natalya still had administrative privileges. And most disturbingly, the plugin had only responded to login credentials connected to a dormant employee profile, a profile that had been under Natalya's supervision during her tenure in financial strategy. The implications were staggering. Natalya hadn't just planted seeds of doubt. She had engineered a comprehensive financial illusion. By redirecting scrutiny towards Sonny, she had ensured that any red flags would immediately be attributed to his checkered past, effectively shielding herself from suspicion. Her calculated deceit extended even to the phantom flash drive, an object she waved like a talisman, promising that its contents could exonerate Sonny while never actually presenting it. It was a trap within a trap. Maxie, now standing on the precipice of truth, felt a wave of fury course through her. She remembered all the times Sonny had risked his own freedom, his name, even his life, for the people he loved, herself included. The thought that someone would not only betray that loyalty but weaponize it against him made her physically ill. But emotion had to wait. This was now a matter of evidence, timing, and precision. She instructed Spinelli to compile a full digital footprint. Every log, every line of altered code, every anomaly Natalya had left behind, whether intentionally or through hubris. Together, they created an encrypted dossier. Within its pages were screen captures of unauthorized logins, forensic analysis of code modifications, comparisons of financial reports before and after Natalya's interventions, and connections to offshore entities. Maxie reviewed it repeatedly, cross-checking every item with Deception's archived data, determined to ensure its ironclad integrity. And in doing so, she noticed something else. The paper trail led not only to Natalya's private accounts but to a dummy corporation she had quietly registered in Switzerland, one that matched the alias used on 2 suspicious deception payments. It was clear now. Natalya hadn't just manipulated data, she had siphoned funds. And she had done it by building a narrative that cast Sonny as the fall guy. A man with a notorious reputation, already weighed down by years of legal scrutiny, would never be given the benefit of the doubt. Natalya had counted on that. She had anticipated the silence of the boardroom, the indifference of the legal system, and the fatigue of those around her. But what she hadn't counted on was Maxie's tenacity. Maxie wasn't just working to clear Sonny's name. She was preparing to expose Natalya completely, to dismantle every lie she had sewn into the fabric of Deception's operations. This wasn't just about numbers anymore. It was about power, legacy, and justice. And if Maxie had anything to say about it, Natalya wouldn't just lose her influence, she would lose everything she tried to build on deceit. There was still work to do. Maxie had yet to decide how to approach the next phase. Whether to bring the findings to the board first, or confront Natalya directly. She needed to consult Brooke Lynn, perhaps even loop in Tracy when the time was right. For now, she kept the evidence secured in multiple locations, distributed across encrypted cloud storage and a set of physical drives guarded by Spinelli. The clock was ticking, and every moment counted. But one thing was certain, Natalya's house of cards was crumbling. And Maxie would be there to watch it fall. Not out of vengeance, but because the truth deserved daylight, and Sonny, whatever his past sins, deserved a future free from the shadow of false betrayal. As Maxie delved deeper into the abyss of Deception's financial records, her growing suspicion gave way to horror as she uncovered layer upon layer of what could only be described as creative accounting, a sophisticated form of financial manipulation designed to camouflage illicit activity. This wasn't the kind of fuzzy math used to balance quarterly projections or shift budget lines to appease investors. This was deliberate. Calculated. Criminal. The documents showed a staggering pattern of laundering large sums of money through so-called marketing and research expenditures, many of which led back to entities that had no physical offices, no personnel, and no traceable output. Maxie scrutinized one vendor invoice after another, finding that each one carried nearly identical formatting, vague service descriptions, and timestamps that conveniently aligned with specific surges in Deception's liquid capital. Her heart pounded when she came across a payment chain leading to a shell corporation headquartered in Queens, a city she knew well, and one that Natalya had once called home during her tenure on the East Coast financial scene. The Queens-based advertising agency bore a name that, at first glance, looked innocuous. But with Spinelli's help, Maxie traced its registration to an apartment address that Natalya herself had leased years ago, and suddenly, the entire plot began to unravel with chilling clarity. Every piece of evidence was like a shard of glass fitting into a stained glass window depicting betrayal in its most elegant form. Natalya had used her insider access at Deception to embed a false narrative. One that painted Sonny as a shadowy figure diverting funds to support his personal criminal empire. But in reality, Natalya had funneled money through front organizations under the guise of corporate promotion, pocketing funds while building a framework of lies carefully positioned to frame Sonny if things ever came to light. Maxie realized that Natalya's entire strategy was built not only on deception but on psychological warfare. By warning Brooke Lynn about Sonny's dirty money, she seeded doubt among those closest to him. By planting rumors of a mysterious flash drive, she created a phantom that would redirect any future investigation. And by doing so, Natalya had preemptively deflected suspicion from herself and ensured Sonny's downfall would seem inevitable. What sickened Maxie the most wasn't just the scale of the fraud, but the cruelty of it. Sonny had been a constant protector of those who needed him most. In the darkest corners of Port Charles, he was the light many turned to when hope seemed lost. Maxie knew this not from hearsay, but from personal experience. Sonny had stood by her family when no one else would, had protected Georgie when she was too fragile to face the world, had taken risks to safeguard Spinelli, and had never asked for anything in return. The idea that someone would exploit that trust, would weaponize Sonny's past and manipulate his generosity into an instrument of his own destruction, was unbearable. Maxie's response was swift and methodical. She knew that bringing this information to light prematurely could sabotage any legal case against Natalya. If Natalya got wind of what Maxie had found, she would bury the rest of the trail, scrub the remaining servers, disband the shell corporations, and disappear behind a firewall of legal immunity. Maxie had to be careful. So she began building a counterattack. She compiled everything: IP logs, invoice anomalies, VPN addresses, vendor records, altered source code from the financial software, and even private bank statements that had been hidden in archival storage, and encrypted them into a secure dossier. She stored duplicates in cloud services with rotating access keys and had Spinelli create offline backups protected by biometric locks. Every piece of digital evidence was catalogued, labeled, and dated. Realizing she couldn't fight this battle alone, Maxie quietly contacted a neutral attorney, someone not involved in Deception's legal team, someone discreet yet principled. She sent them a redacted copy of the evidence with instructions to hold it in confidence unless an indictment was imminent. Simultaneously, she tasked Spinelli with reaching out to Jason. Because if things escalated, and Sonny found himself on the brink of prosecution, Jason was the only person capable of pulling strings without alerting the wrong people. Jason had the loyalty, the resources, and most importantly, the judgment to know how and when to act. Maxie, though burning with righteous fury, refused to let emotion dictate her next move. She knew that Natalya was still watching, still weaving her story into the consciousness of Deception's board and the DA's office alike. So Maxie chose silence as her shield and preparation as her sword. She met with Brooke Lynn in a quiet corner of the Metro Court and calmly explained the situation. Brooke Lynn was stunned but understood the gravity. Together, they agreed to maintain the appearance of neutrality, nodding along to Natalya's continued warnings, playing the part of cautious executives while secretly dismantling the narrative from within. Over the following days, Maxie intensified the internal audit. She cross-verified every single line item in the company's expenditure for the past year, not just the ones in question. She interviewed junior accountants under the guise of performance reviews, subtly probing for signs of outside influence or gaps in procedural oversight. She monitored Natalya's movements through Deception's access logs, waiting for even the slightest misstep, a login, a file download, a deletion attempt. Nothing escaped her scrutiny. Maxie knew the day of reckoning was coming. She could feel the pressure building within the walls of Deception like a storm behind closed windows. She envisioned the boardroom, the shock in Tracy's eyes when she realized how close the company had come to ruin. She could almost hear the silence that would follow when Natalya's polished facade cracked and the truth spilled out. Not just about the fraud, but about the weaponization of loyalty, the betrayal of trust, and the cold calculation behind every move. But until that day arrived, Maxie would wait. She would gather. She would prepare. Because exposing a lie wasn't enough, not this time. It had to be undeniable. It had to be bulletproof. And when it was, Natalya wouldn't just fall, she would be erased from the world she tried to dominate. And Sonny? He would walk away not only free but vindicated, his honor intact, protected by a woman who refused to let loyalty be trampled by deceit. In a world where reputations are often destroyed by whispers, Maxie had chosen to speak the truth, even if it had to roar. As Tracy prepared to convene a high-stakes board meeting aimed at reassessing the role of major investors in Deception Cosmetics, the tension in the company corridors was nearly palpable. Rumors had already begun to circulate. Some whispering about Sonny's supposed financial impropriety, others hinting at internal sabotage. The air was thick with anticipation, and Maxie, though calm in appearance, moved like a woman on a mission. She knew that Natalya had orchestrated a narrative so intricate and convincing that even seasoned members of the board were starting to believe Sonny had used the company for laundering purposes. If this board meeting proceeded without intervention, Sonny could lose everything. Not only his investment but his integrity, his standing, and the fragile network of trust he had painstakingly rebuilt in Port Charles. Maxie couldn't allow that to happen. Acting with deliberate precision, she arranged a discreet meeting with a neutral board member, someone known for their impartiality and strong ethics, someone who wouldn't be swayed by media noise or Natalya's manipulation. She shared only a portion of the evidence she had compiled. Several anonymized transaction logs, metadata linking Natalya's IP address to unauthorized data edits, and proof of shell companies with fraudulent billing cycles. It wasn't the whole picture, just enough to raise serious doubt about the prevailing narrative. And that was all it took. The board meeting was abruptly postponed. Tracy, ever meticulous and strategic, insisted on a comprehensive internal review before any decisive action could be taken. While publicly citing the need for due diligence, Maxie knew the delay was a lifeline. The absence of concrete evidence against Sonny, paired with the emergence of disturbing anomalies within the company's own records, had shifted the board's gaze away from him. He was no longer the presumed culprit but a figure tangled in a larger web of deceit. Thanks to Maxie's intervention, Sonny had, for the moment, dodged the guillotine blade of legal prosecution and corporate condemnation. But the delay was not a victory, it was a reprieve. In the shadows of deception's gleaming office towers, Maxie continued to work, sifting through every line of code, every suspicious transaction, every whispered conversation. The war was far from over. Natalya had constructed a fortress of lies with the craftsmanship of a master manipulator, and Maxie knew better than to underestimate her. Natalya wasn't just deceptive. She was calculating, with an uncanny ability to sense threat and extinguish it before it could gain momentum. But what Natalya didn't account for was the depth of Maxie's resolve, nor the strength of the allies she had gathered. Spinelli was the digital bloodhound, tracing Natalya's cyber footprints with relentless precision. Jason stood as the shadow guardian, ready to intervene the moment things escalated beyond containment. Brooke Lynn, once merely a confidant, had evolved into an indispensable ally on the inside. Her access to board discussions and her ability to interpret Tracy's evolving strategy proved critical. Together, this unlikely alliance was weaving a counter-narrative, one grounded not in suspicion, but in irrefutable truth. Maxie was no longer just protecting Sonny. She was defending the very soul of deception, a company she had poured her blood, sweat, and dreams into from its earliest days. Deception had been born in a blaze of creativity and courage, built by women determined to defy the rules of corporate beauty standards. It wasn't just a brand, it was a legacy. And now, that legacy was under siege by someone who viewed it as nothing more than a tool for personal advancement and financial exploitation. Maxie would not allow years of hard work to be buried under falsehoods. This was no longer just business, it was personal. Every night, Maxie stayed late, her office lit long after others had left, surrounded by stacks of files, forensic spreadsheets, and spinning hard drives. She cataloged everything, updating her confidential dossier with meticulous care. She worked through weekends, skipped events, ignored voicemails. There was no space in her mind for distraction. Her singular focus was the truth, and she would find it, no matter how deep Natalya had buried it. She knew Natalya was watching. The woman had grown increasingly paranoid in recent days, subtly questioning team members, auditing her own departments under the guise of transparency. But Maxie said nothing. She smiled when needed, nodded at board updates, played her role flawlessly while slowly tightening the noose around the one woman who thought herself untouchable. Maxie also began crafting the narrative that would eventually replace Natalya's web of lies. She gathered testimonials, quietly interviewed former employees who had worked under Natalya, dug up old emails that painted a different picture of Natalya's intentions. She cross-referenced her findings with public records and even reached out to legal contacts in New York to track Natalya's former financial activities. The pieces were forming a clear image, one of premeditated sabotage, identity manipulation, and financial fraud on an interstate level. Still, Maxie remained cautious. Truth, she had learned, wasn't enough to win wars. It had to be revealed at the right time, to the right people, and in a way that could not be dismissed. So she waited. Patient. Watching. Calculating. Until the moment would come when she could open the floodgates and let the truth drown out the lies. And when that moment came, Maxie would not flinch. Because in a world where reputations could be ruined with a whisper, where corporations crumbled under the weight of public perception, and where the innocent were sacrificed to protect the powerful, only one force remained powerful enough to push back: justice. Not the kind written in legal codes, but the kind rooted in truth, loyalty, and the unshakable determination of someone who had seen too much loss to remain silent.